It is not a coincidence. Every time the world pushes for a ceasefire, Israel responds with a massacre, like the one in the school. It sends a message, each more gruesome than the one before, that it will not stop. But there is no right to commit genocide. Obviously, no right. And we warn all those contributing directly or indirectly to the emergence of such a right. There is nothing that can justify Israeli actions.
For more on this, joining me now is Khalil Jahshan, the Executive Director of the Arab Center in Washington. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. You know, since October the 7th, the United Nations Security Council has met multiple times, and every time they meet, of course, there are statements of condemnation, the strongest speeches, but when it comes to finding tangible solutions to bring an end to Israeli onslaught in Gaza, we don't really see any progress. So what's the point of having these meetings?
It's diplomatic deja vu for the umpteenth time. We've seen this movie before, and it's getting boring, frankly. It's a bad joke if it weren't for all the killing and all the victims that we see on a daily basis. It's no longer funny. I think this is a price we have to pay for the U.S. In a way surrendering its own sovereign decision-making with this regard. It is insisting on controlling the process. It's insisting on managing whatever talks take place, essentially to protect Israel from its own folly. Yet at the same time, it's not willing to put its foot down and demand that Israel end this war now or pay a price. That's what's missing in the formula at this time.
What's holding them back from doing that?
Domestic politics, to start with, and this is not new and it's not unique to Palestine. Anytime you mix in American politics, domestic politics with international or national interest issues, you end up putting yourself in the corner and deprive yourself of the ability to maneuver diplomatically. This is exactly the case here. They surrendered decision-making to Mr. Netanyahu from the very beginning for domestic purposes, and the fact that the U.S. is approaching presidential elections on November 5th makes it very difficult for this administration to take the right decision.
Now, Khalil, let me ask you, the United Nations Security Council is still operating with its old system. There are 5 countries which have veto power. And just today we heard from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres that the African continent should have some sort of a representation in the UNSC. I wonder, do you think the outcome coming from meetings such as today would be different if there was more equitable representation of different factions of the world?
Definitely. Frankly, academically speaking and analytically speaking, this has been the rationale for the need to reform the National Security Council. For many years, people have said the makeup of the council, particularly having the U.S. veto there and multiple other Western vetoes there, has prevented the world body from being fair and being decisive and being useful in terms of ending crises of the sort we are living at this point. So if the membership is definitely revamped and the third world, let's say, is being more representative than it is today, or the world population being more honestly representative than it has been, I would say yes, the outcome would be totally different.
Now, Khalil, major developments have taken place in the lead up to ceasefire talks that are supposed to take place on Thursday. And the anticipation out there is that if there is a ceasefire in Gaza, that Iran might not even conduct its retaliatory attack against Israel. That's according to reports. What do you think would happen on Thursday, and how likely is it at this point that Iranian attack will not happen?
As everybody knows, there has been all kinds of diplomacy taking place the last few days, including, of course, the United States itself. This is not just conventional wisdom that was implied in your question, but actually the US administration, through its own Secretary of State, has admitted that essentially, should there be a ceasefire agreement, that Iran will most probably postpone or cancel the anticipated, if you will, attack on Israel in retaliation for violating Iranian sovereignty. Apparently, there is some sort of understanding. Otherwise, that wouldn't be announced at the highest levels of US government, the highest level of European governments who have been intervening and participating in this process, including Germany, including Switzerland, including France, and others. And it wouldn't have been hinted at even by the Iranian government itself. So apparently there is some legitimacy to this fact. And yet, at the same time, as I said, the process is at the mercy of a dictator. You know, it's at the mercy of Netanyahu, personally deciding, and he seems to be opting for protecting his own personal interests, staying out of jail, rather than essentially responding to international demands for a ceasefire and even catering to his own country's national interests.
Right, Khalil, it's interesting that you say that the process is at the mercy of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, but historically speaking, the U.S. Has had a lot of influence on Tel Aviv. In fact, even if you speak to experts now, they would say if there's one entity, one country that can possibly end Israeli onslaught on Gaza, then it is the United States. So you think the U.S. cannot do anything at this point to convince or perhaps persuade Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire agreement?
The exact opposite. I think I agree with that assessment implied in your question, and I've always belonged to that school. That when Washington sneezes, it registers, 10.9 on the political Richter scale in Tel Aviv. If the political will is there to make Israel pay a price for refusing to abide by American interests, by American wishes. However, due to the political game being played here, the domestic politics, if you will, there is a feeling among politicians from the top on to the bottom, from the President of the United States on downward, somehow that self-emasculation is the name of the game, that the U.S. has absolutely no influence on Israel, and Israel will always say no to American pressure. That is not the case. It has been done in the past, and it always worked.
Khalil Jahshan, thanks very much for talking to us here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time.